Welcome to Sleepy Stories, where the tides of curiosity carry you gently toward rest. Here, we drift through real knowledge at the pace of calm breath, letting learning soften the edges of the day. Whether you're already sinking into sleep or simply looking for a place to rest your thoughts, you're exactly where you need to be. There's no pressure to follow every detail. Your mind will hold what it needs. The rest can float past like foam on the sea. If you find comfort in this quiet journey through time and science, feel free to like this video and subscribe to the channel. That simple gesture helps keep these soft explorations flowing into the night, for you and others like you. Tonight, we begin a journey that has no single destination, only depth. We turn our attention to something vast, ancient, and always moving, the ocean. But we won't chase waves or storms. We'll listen instead to the silence beneath them. Because this is not the story of ships or sailors. It is the story of the ocean itself, not just as water, but as witness, a memory that has flowed layer by layer through the entire history of the Earth. From far above, Earth appears as a blue planet, not blue in patches or corners, but wrapped almost completely in water. Oceans cover most of its surface, folding over continents like soft cloth, hiding mountains taller than any on land. If you could peel back the clouds and look down, you would see a world cradled in motion, where sunlight dances on currents and winds carve spirals into the sea's skin. But what lies beneath that shimmer is even more remarkable. The ocean is not just a surface. It is depth, it is weight, it is silence that moves. Its waters hold heat from ancient sunlight, particles from distant deserts, and the stories of life that bloomed and vanished long before mammals stirred. Every drop carries minerals once locked in stone, memories of volcanic fire, and whispers of organisms so small we've only recently learned their names. These waters have cradled continents and outlived empires. They have absorbed the sky's breath and mirrored the moon's pull. In every sense that matters, the ocean is older than memory, and yet it is memory itself. It does not remember in words or images. It remembers in currents, in sediments, in chemistry, in the rise and fall of salinity, in the fossil of a shell smaller than a pin, in a layer of clay deep below the seabed, where a silent record of catastrophe is pressed like a leaf into stone. The ocean remembers by accepting everything and forgetting nothing. It is not passive. It moves. Slowly. Deeply. With purpose. Beneath the surface swells lies a hidden engine of circulation that has carried warmth from the tropics to the poles for longer than any map has existed. Beneath that, pressure increases until it feels like time itself slows down. But even here, life stirs, microbes drift, heat seeps from below, and every molecule keeps count. Somewhere in that cold silence, the same water that once brushed the skin of trilobites may now move toward the Antarctic. It doesn't rush. It doesn't need to. As we begin this journey, we do not need to understand all at once. We simply need to float, to allow the idea that the ocean is not merely where life began, it is where life was first remembered. Let your thoughts settle. Let your breath follow the slow tide in your chest. The ocean has waited billions of years to tell this story. It can wait a little longer while you rest. The earth had cooled, the rain had fallen, and the world had begun to hold its shape. But the ocean was still becoming. In those early days, the surface of the earth was not the familiar patchwork of continents and coastlines. It was a restless crust, fragile, young, and endlessly changing. Volcanic ridges spread across the seafloor, birthing new rock. Gashes in the surface opened and closed like slow-healing wounds. Islands erupted and sank again. The land had no memory yet. But the ocean was learning. It gathered in low places, poured into cracks, and pooled where the rock gave way. There were no beaches, no waves as we know them. Only the slow deepening of vast basins, the soft rise of water above the stone. The air was thick with carbon dioxide, the sky a shifting canvas of light filtered through haze. Sunlight reached the surface, but the depths remained untouched, cold, black, and quiet. And yet, the ocean moved. Even in these ancient times, winds blew across its skin, pushing water into spirals and drifts. Beneath the surface, heat from the Earth's core created currents, lifting warm water and sinking cold. Minerals leached from newly formed rock, dissolving into the water. Bit by bit, the ocean was becoming more than a mirror of the sky. It was becoming a chemical world, a dynamic system, a home not just for molecules, but for memory. The rocks beneath the sea changed in response. Lava that cooled underwater formed rounded pillows, strange shapes hardened by sudden contact with cold water. These pillow basalts still rest on the seafloor, untouched for hundreds of millions of years, like fossils of fire. Where tectonic plates met, trenches formed, some so deep they could swallow entire mountain ranges. Where plates pulled apart, ridges spread like slow-growing scars, creating new ocean floor inch by inch. The land was not yet fixed. It floated on a mantle that churned like batter on a stove. But the ocean was patient. It rose and filled and waited. The waters that settled into these basins were rich in dissolved ions, calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium. Over time, their balance stabilized. The salty taste of today's oceans was set not by chance, but by interaction, between water and rock, heat and cold, movement and stillness. And this balance, once established, became the ocean's signature. Even now, when scientists study the chemistry of other planets, they look for this balance as a clue, a hint that water might once have held memory elsewhere. But here, on Earth, the ocean continued to deepen. Rainfall, glacial melt, and volcanic steam fed it. Rivers began to form, tracing paths across the newborn land, bringing minerals and sediments into the sea. The ocean grew not just wider, but wiser, more connected to the rest of the planet, more capable of change. There were no fish, no coral, no plants clinging to rocks. But there was motion, there was temperature, there was pressure, and there was time. This ocean, silent and vast, began to shape the land itself. It carved coasts, softened cliffs, and ground stone into sand. It did not hurry, it didn't need to, and all the while, beneath the surface, something else was beginning. The ingredients for life, simple molecules, drifting close together, were dissolving, reacting, splitting, and reforming. The water was no longer just a container. It had become a medium for possibility. The ocean had been born. It was dark and unfamiliar, but it was alive with chemistry. It had no language, but it had purpose. It did not know what would come next, but it was ready. Below the waves, where sunlight faded into shadow and pressure began to rise, the ocean became more than a body of water. It became a crucible. In this segment of deep time, Earth's oceans served not just as a resting place for minerals and molecules, but as an active workshop for reactions. Water, after all, is not passive. It dissolves, separates, transports, and transforms. And in its early chapters, it held a world of ingredients waiting to combine. Volcanoes still erupted beneath the surface, releasing gases rich in carbon dioxide, methane, hydrogen sulfide, and ammonia. These substances did not vanish. They dissolved into seawater, where they mixed with metals and ions from the surrounding crust. The ocean was thick with possibility, a swirling broth of chemicals under heat and pressure. At certain points along the seafloor, where cracks opened and magma pushed close to the crust, something remarkable occurred. Superheated water, rich in minerals, burst into the cold ocean through structures now known as hydrothermal vents. These vents spewed dark clouds of iron, sulfur, and silica. Where the hot fluids met cold seawater, minerals crystallized and settled, forming towering chimneys over time. But more than stone formed there. Around these vents, life found a foothold, or perhaps its origin. In the absence of sunlight, early organisms did not photosynthesize. They chemosynthesized. That is, they drew energy from chemical reactions, using the rich gradients of heat and minerals to build their cells. Simple molecules linked together, folded into patterns, and became self-replicating. These were not yet cells, not yet alive in the way we understand today, but they were moving in that direction. The ocean offered everything needed: space, motion, energy, and protection. It shielded these fragile beginnings from ultraviolet radiation and meteor impacts. It gave time for mistakes, for trials, for changes. Molecules that were unstable in air could survive in water. Structures that would fall apart in heat could float safely in a cold current. Over thousands of years, then millions, then longer still, something new took shape. Chains of amino acids folded into proteins. Lipids arranged themselves into membranes. RNA strands began to copy themselves with help from mineral surfaces, and once replication began, evolution followed. These early life forms were not elegant. They were simple, fragile, and endlessly experimental. Most failed, but some endured, and slowly, the ocean filled with life too small to see. This was the turning point. From a chemical sea, a biological world was emerging. The first true cells, prokaryotes, evolved, likely near these same deep-sea vents. They lived in darkness, clinging to rocks or drifting in warm mineral flows. They left behind no fossils, but their descendants persist even now, unchanged in many ways. Archaea and bacteria that survive at the bottom of today's oceans may carry echoes of this first moment. The cradle of chemistry had rocked life into being. Elsewhere in the ocean, sunlight touched the surface, sparking different reactions. Some of these early organisms would learn to harness that light, storing its energy in sugar and releasing oxygen as waste. But that came later. In these first deep places, light was not required. Only heat, mineral, water, and time. The ocean did not guide or interfere. It simply allowed. And so it became the keeper of life's most important memory, not of what was made, but of how making became possible. It remembered not a blueprint, but a process, one that would repeat, adapt, evolve, and it held that process with perfect silence. Somewhere in the darkness, a boundary was crossed. For eons, the ocean had offered ingredients. Molecules collided, separated, joined again. They floated in silence, shaped by chance and chemistry. But then, a moment came, not a flash or a bang, but a quiet shift, when something changed. A molecule copied itself. Not perfectly, not with intent, but with enough fidelity to begin something new. Life had begun. It was simple at first. A membrane enclosing fluid, a loop of genetic code, a cell that could absorb, react, and divide. Nothing more. But it was enough. It could persist. It could change. It could leave behind copies, slightly different from itself. These earliest life forms were single-celled organisms, bacteria and archaea, and they were small beyond sight. They drifted through the sea, clinging to rocks, gathering near warm vents, floating through gentle currents. They consumed minerals or sunlight, depending on their place. Some thrived near hydrothermal vents, using sulfur and heat. Others rose to sunlit shallows and learned to use light itself. Photosynthesis arrived, slowly. Organisms captured sunlight, used it to split water molecules, and released oxygen into the water. At first, that oxygen reacted with iron in the sea, forming rust that settled into layers. The ocean turned red with iron oxide, like a silent transformation written in stone. Eventually, the oxygen spread further, changing not just the chemistry of water, but the composition of the air. But long before that, the ocean was already alive. It teemed with microbial life, invisible to us, but vast in number. These cells moved through water like thoughts through a mind, slowly shaping their environment even as they were shaped by it. They lived without eyes, without bones, without breath. But they responded, they sensed, they endured. Stromatolites began to form, layered structures created by microbial mats in shallow waters. These colonies built up over time, trapping sediment and forming rocky domes. Some of the oldest fossils on Earth are stromatolites, still found today in quiet bays where life hasn't moved on. Each layer is a whisper of activity, of growth, of sunlight harnessed and stored. These tiny architects built the first structures made by life, and in doing so, they left a record not just of existence, but of time. The spark of life was not dramatic. It did not need to be. It was steady, persistent. It multiplied, filled every niche it could find, and changed the planet in slow waves. Life did not conquer the ocean, it became part of it. Even now, most life in the sea remains microscopic. Plankton, bacteria, archaea, they drift by the trillions, feeding entire ecosystems, recycling carbon, producing much of the oxygen we breathe. The legacy of that first spark endures in every drop of seawater. The ocean remembers where life began, not with a roar, but with a ripple. It remembers the first time a molecule chose to preserve itself, the first time division led to growth, the first time survival carried meaning. And it keeps that memory not in a library, not in stone, but in its rhythms, in the way life still follows chemical gradients, still clings to heat, still rides the currents of the deep. The spark remains, faint perhaps, forgotten perhaps, but still glowing, somewhere in the quiet folds of the sea. Oxygen is a breath we barely notice, but once it was a poison. In the beginning, Earth's oceans were anoxic, that is, they held no free oxygen. Life thrived without it, drawing energy from minerals, sulfur, and methane in the deep. The balance was steady, familiar, quiet. Then, some of those early cells learned something new. They began to harness sunlight more efficiently, using water as an electron source and releasing oxygen as a byproduct. It changed everything. Photosynthetic microbes, especially cyanobacteria, filled the shallows with a quiet industry. They pulled in carbon dioxide, captured photons from the sun, and released oxygen molecule by molecule. At first, the ocean absorbed it. Iron in the water reacted with oxygen, forming insoluble rust that settled on the sea floor. These layers of red, known as banded iron formations, still line ancient rocks today, silent witnesses to the shift. But eventually, the sponge was full. There was no more iron to oxidize, no more chemical sinks to absorb the excess. Oxygen began to collect in the water, then in the air, and that's when the crisis began. Many of the existing organisms, adapted to an oxygen-free world, could not survive in its presence. Oxygen was reactive, corrosive. It broke bonds and disrupted processes. Cells shriveled. Populations collapsed. Whole microbial ecosystems died off. What one group of microbes saw as an opportunity, others experienced as a catastrophe. The ocean recorded it all, not in sound or story, but in chemistry, in isotope ratios locked inside ancient shells, in the sudden appearance of oxygen-binding minerals in sediments, in the fossil gaps left by vanished species. The event came to be known as the Great Oxygenation, and though it devastated much of the microbial world, it also opened doors. Oxygen allowed for more efficient energy use. Organisms that adapted to it could grow larger, move faster, build more complex structures. It laid the foundation for multicellular life, even for breath itself. The ocean didn't judge, it simply held the change. It remembered. Today, when we inhale, we're drawing on a gift that once nearly ended life. Oxygen sustains us now, but its rise came with a price. That price was extinction, but also possibility. Even now, deep in the ocean, there are places where oxygen never reached, pockets of ancient chemistry, home to archaea that never needed to change. They carry the signature of a world before air, before lungs, before skies turned blue. The ocean keeps both truths, the old and the new, within itself. And now, as you settle further into rest, perhaps your breath begins to slow, in, out, a gentle tide in your chest. Oxygen, once deadly, now so familiar, moving without thought. Your body remembers the ocean too, in the salt of your blood, in the way your cells use oxygen to release energy, in the quiet rhythm that mirrors the turning tides. Let sleep come as it will. Or not yet. There's no need to hurry. The ocean didn't rush to bring oxygen. It waited, drop by drop, moment by moment, until the world was ready to change. And now, beneath your breathing, beneath the layers of time, that slow patience remains. The sea has always been more than water. It is a solution, not just in the chemical sense, but in the quiet way it holds answers to questions we forget to ask. This segment begins in the bloodstream. Human blood is salty. Its composition, sodium, chloride, potassium, calcium, magnesium, mirrors the ionic balance of ancient seas. Not perfectly, but closely enough to raise a question. Are we carrying a memory of the ocean inside us? Long before humans, long before even animals with blood, life learned to manage salt. In those earliest cells, floating in warm, mineral-rich water, survival depended on balance. Too much sodium, and the membrane would rupture. Too little, and energy couldn't flow. The first living cells evolved mechanisms to control their internal chemistry: pumps, gates, selective barriers. These were not inventions. They were necessities. Without salt regulation, life would have dissolved before it began. The ocean at the time was not like today's. It was more acidic, filled with heavy metals, stirred by volcanic activity. But it held the elements of structure. Calcium helped build primitive shells. Magnesium stabilized the folding of RNA. Sodium and chloride, plentiful and mobile, became the conductors of nerve signals long before nerves existed. The sea shaped life's chemistry, and life adapted in return. Over generations, the ionic makeup of the ocean shifted. Rain washed minerals from land into rivers, which emptied into the sea. Volcanoes erupted underwater, adding new elements. Biological activity altered the proportions of carbon and nitrogen, and through it all, organisms evolved to survive in this changing solution. Some built shells, others built skeletons. Still others dissolved their prey with enzymes and acids, biological echoes of the ocean's own alchemy. Then came the blueprint. DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, evolved not in a vacuum, but in seawater. Its double helix is stabilized by salt ions. Its replication depends on enzymes that require specific trace elements. The earliest genetic codes were likely shaped by the chemistry of their environment. What worked in seawater survived, what didn't, faded. To this day, the structure of DNA reflects that origin. Its phosphate backbone is negatively charged and requires positive ions to hold it steady. Its twists and folds respond to salinity and temperature. In laboratories, scientists still use salt solutions to extract and preserve DNA, just as the ocean once did, naturally and without design. Even as life moved onto land, it brought the sea with it. Blood remained salty, cells kept their pumps, sweat, tears, and even the fluid in our inner ears hold echoes of ancient salinity. When we taste salt, we taste something older than thought. Marine creatures still live more directly in this blueprint. Coral polyps build calcium carbonate skeletons from seawater. Fish regulate their internal salt levels constantly, drinking seawater and excreting the excess. Planktonic organisms carry genes shaped by billions of years of selective pressure, guided by the chemical memory of the sea. The blueprint in salt is not just molecular, it is behavioral. Migratory fish return to their birthplace by sensing tiny shifts in salinity. Marine mammals can detect fresh water from miles away. Even deep-sea creatures, isolated from sunlight and oxygen, are tuned to the mineral cues of their environment. Salt is not just a substance, it is a signal. The ocean's salinity, stable for millions of years, remains a constant against which change is measured. When fresh water floods in or when climate shifts alter evaporation, the ocean adjusts, but it remembers its balance. And that balance defines what lives and what fades. The blueprint continues, not on parchment, not in stone, but in the salt within us, and the memory it holds. Beneath the ocean, the earth breathes in stone. Its surface, which may seem fixed and unmoving, is in constant motion, not in hours or days, but in slow, powerful rhythms that play out over spans so long the ocean barely stirs in response. And yet, it is the ocean that holds the clearest memory of this motion. This is the story of plate tectonics, as told by the sea. The Earth's crust is divided into giant plates, slabs of solid rock that float on the mantle, a deeper layer of slow-moving, heated rock that churns like thick batter. These plates shift over time. They pull apart, grind past each other, or dive below one another in a process known as subduction. The ocean floor is where much of this drama unfolds. Along mid-ocean ridges, magma rises from the mantle and hardens into new crust. As more magma arrives, it pushes older crust outward, creating seafloor spreading. Like a conveyor belt of stone, the seafloor moves away from the ridge, carrying with it the silent record of time. These newly formed rocks record the direction of Earth's magnetic field at the moment they cool. Because that field occasionally flips, with the north and south poles switching places, the ocean crust ends up striped with symmetrical bands of reversed polarity. These magnetic barcodes, perfectly mirrored on either side of mid-ocean ridges, reveal how long and how steadily the crust has moved. Eventually, this spreading crust reaches the edge of another plate. There, in deep ocean trenches, it sinks back into the Earth. The Pacific Ocean, with its vast subduction zones, is slowly shrinking. Meanwhile, the Atlantic, younger and less surrounded by trenches, continues to widen. The continents ride on these plates like rafts. Over hundreds of millions of years, they drift together and break apart. Once, all land was united in a single supercontinent, surrounded by a single vast ocean. Then it split, and new oceans opened between the fragments. The ocean has witnessed these changes without resistance. It fills what opens, it smooths what shatters, and it holds the memory of every movement. Sediment on the seafloor grows thicker with distance from the mid-ocean ridge. Close to the ridge, the crust is young and bare. Farther out, it accumulates layer after layer of plankton shells, volcanic ash, and dust blown in from continents. By measuring the thickness of this sediment, scientists can date the crust beneath, revealing the slow but steady migration of oceanic plates across the globe. In this way, the ocean is both a traveler and an archivist. Volcanoes rise along tectonic boundaries, some piercing the surface to form islands. Chains like the Hawaiian Islands are built as plates pass over stationary hotspots, leaving trails of volcanic peaks behind. Earthquakes ripple through subduction zones, shaking the seafloor and sometimes triggering tsunamis that race across the ocean at incredible speed. These waves may seem sudden, but their origins lie in slow, grinding tension that builds over centuries. The ocean does not resist these changes, it adapts. When mountains rise beneath it, it folds around them. When basins open, it pours in. When continents collide and reshape coastlines, the sea follows, gently but relentlessly. Its boundaries are drawn by forces below, and it remembers, not in words, but in patterns, of heat, of crust, of rock, magnetic fields, of sediment age. Every inch of the ocean floor carries a timestamp, a direction, a destination. What moves slowly lasts longest. The ocean knows this better than we do. At the bottom of the sea, far beneath the reach of storms, there is no light, no wind, no sound, but the faint settling of time. Layer by layer, particle by particle, the ocean builds its memory. This memory is written not in ink or code, but in sediment, a slow drift of dust, shells, volcanic ash, and tiny skeletons falls gently through the water column, eventually settling onto the seafloor. Each year adds a fraction of a millimeter. Over millennia, these thin layers compress into a silent archive, one that holds the story of Earth's changing face, climate, and life. Cores taken from deep beneath the seafloor reveal these layers as a vertical timeline. The deeper the layer, the older the story. Some cores stretch hundreds of meters, with each section marked by color, texture, and chemistry. A layer rich in dark organic material might mark a time of low oxygen. A sudden band of volcanic ash tells of a distant eruption. A shift in isotopic ratios might whisper of a cooling world, or the spread of ice over continents. The shells of foraminifera, tiny planktonic organisms, record the temperature of the ocean in the ratio of oxygen isotopes they contain. When they die, their shells rain down to the seabed, becoming part of the sedimentary record. By analyzing their chemistry, scientists can reconstruct sea surface temperatures from thousands to millions of years ago. The ocean, it turns out, has kept a thermometer running all this time. Dust blown from deserts, pollen carried from distant forests, microscopic shards of meteoric iron, all of it ends up here. Even human history has begun to leave its trace. Tiny particles from nuclear tests, traces of plastic, and soot from burning fossil fuels are already forming distinct markers in the sediment, identifying the age we now live in. The ocean does not resist this memory. It receives, it holds, it buries. There are places where this layering is exceptionally clear. In quiet basins, where little oxygen reaches the bottom, disturbance is minimal. No scavengers stir the mud. No strong currents erase the lines. In these anoxic zones, the ocean keeps a more faithful record than any scribe. It writes with stillness. But even in more active regions, the memory holds. Turbidites, layers formed by underwater landslides, mark moments of sudden collapse. Tsunami deposits signal long past earthquakes. Iron-rich layers recall periods of oxygen loss. The deep ocean, untouched by light, becomes Earth's quietest historian. These layers tell not just of physical events, but of life itself. In some segments, organic matter accumulates, preserved by lack of oxygen. These layers eventually form oil and gas, the buried sunlight of ancient organisms. In others, microfossils bloom, then vanish, marking times of abundance followed by extinction. There are no gaps in the ocean's diary. Where erosion happens, the absence becomes part of the story. Where layers are jumbled, the cause can be traced. Every stratum, no matter how faint, holds meaning. To study a core of ocean sediment is to touch time, not just in years, but in texture. A layer the thickness of a fingernail might hold 1,000 seasons. A band of clay may signal catastrophe. A change in grain size might reflect the coming of glaciers or the retreat of sea ice. What seems inert is alive with history. The land forgets. It is scraped by wind, scoured by rain, reshaped by human hands. But the seafloor, in its stillness, remembers. Every layer is a whisper. Every whisper is a record, and the ocean keeps it all. The earth carries a field around it, invisible, shifting, protective. It shields the planet from cosmic radiation, guides animal migrations, and steadies the compass needle. But this magnetic field is not fixed. It drifts, bends, and sometimes even flips, and the ocean floor remembers every change. This segment traces how the ocean's crust holds a hidden record of Earth's magnetic reversals, a geological memory preserved in stone. Along the ridges that cut across the ocean floor, new crust is constantly being created. Magma rises from the mantle, cools as it contacts seawater, and hardens into basalt. Embedded in that cooling rock are tiny crystals of iron-bearing minerals. As they solidify, these minerals align themselves with the direction of the Earth's magnetic field, like countless microscopic compass needles frozen in place. Over time, as the field slowly wanders and occasionally reverses, with magnetic north becoming south and vice versa, each newly formed strip of crust captures the field's orientation at that moment. The result is a sequence of alternating bands of normal and reversed polarity, stretching outward from the mid-ocean ridge like the pages of a symmetrical book. These magnetic stripes are not random. They are rhythmic. They reflect the tempo of spreading, the timing of reversals, and the motion of tectonic plates. The longer the distance between a ridge and a given stripe, the older the crust. The width of each band reveals how fast the plates were moving when it formed, and the pattern of reversals matches the global magnetic timeline recorded in lava flows on land. In essence, the ocean floor becomes a magnetic tape, not digital, not rewritable, but permanent. It carries a quiet imprint of Earth's heartbeat, pulsing through millions of years. This discovery was pivotal in understanding plate tectonics. It proved that the seafloor spreads, that new crust forms continuously, and that the planet records its own field with stunning fidelity. It also revealed that magnetic reversals are unpredictable, sometimes happening within tens of thousands of years, other times remaining stable for millions. The ocean doesn't just document the direction of the field, it also records its intensity. Variations in magnetic strength are etched into sediment layers rich in magnetized particles. These changes may be linked to solar activity, core dynamics, or processes still poorly understood, but they remain measurable, like soft echoes in the deep. Even the deepest trenches and oldest plates hold these whispers. In the western Pacific, where some of the planet's most ancient crust lies, the stripes are faint but still readable. They stretch across the basin, marking movements so vast and slow they elude ordinary imagination. Elsewhere, at subduction zones, the magnetic memory vanishes, pulled back into the mantle and melted into forgetfulness. But new crust continues to form elsewhere, and the ocean's memory rebuilds itself, band by band. The magnetic field affects more than rock. It influences animal navigation. Sea turtles follow it to return to their birthplaces. Whales, fish, and even some plankton sense it, using its flow as a kind of map. When the field weakens or shifts, their patterns change. The memory in stone links quietly to the memory in biology. So the ocean listens not only to water and light, but to an invisible voice beneath, the voice of a molten core spinning slowly within the planet. It holds the shape of that voice in rock, in symmetry, in silence, and it keeps the story alive, even when we forget to ask what direction we are truly heading. There was a time when the ocean itself may have vanished beneath a shell of ice, not dried, not gone, but sealed, still and breathless. The sea, quiet in its own prison. This is the story of Snowball Earth, a time when ice covered nearly every surface of the planet, from mountain top to sea floor, from pole to equator, and the ocean, which had once stirred with warmth and chemistry, slowed to something close to silence. It began with a shift in the atmosphere. Volcanic eruptions may have altered the balance of greenhouse gases. Weathering of rocks may have drawn too much carbon dioxide from the sky. As the air cooled, glaciers began to grow. Their white surfaces reflected sunlight back into space, reducing the warmth that reached the ground. A feedback loop took hold. Colder air built thicker ice. Ice reflected more sunlight. More sunlight reflected meant colder air still, and the oceans responded. Ice crept across their surface, starting at the poles and pushing toward the tropics. It thickened and hardened, eventually stretching across the planet. Some scientists believe that at the height of this glaciation, even the equator shimmered under an icy sheet. Beneath it, the ocean was trapped, insulated from the sun, isolated from the sky. Life persisted, but barely. Only the hardiest organisms endured. Extremophiles nestled near hydrothermal vents, microbes hiding in brine channels within the ice, photosynthesizers surviving in cracks thin enough to let light pass through. These survivors lived slowly, metabolizing little, reproducing rarely. The ocean, once a cradle of motion and bloom, became a deep chamber of memory and waiting. The evidence lies in ancient rocks. Glacial deposits known as tillites appear in places that were once tropical, suggesting that ice reached across the equator. Layers of cap carbonate sit above them, signaling a sudden return to warmth. Isotopic analysis tells of oceans low in oxygen, low in nutrients, high in patience, and then change returned, not gradually, but dramatically. Volcanoes, still active beneath the ice, continued to pump carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, but with no vegetation or weathering to draw it back down. The gas accumulated. Over millions of years, a powerful greenhouse effect built up. When the tipping point arrived, the change was swift. Temperatures rose, ice melted, oceans roared back into motion. Floods carried nutrients into the seas. Sunlight returned to open water. Life surged again, not as a quiet rebound, but as a bloom. Some believe this event helped trigger evolutionary leaps. The hardship had refined the survivors. Now, with energy and space returned, they expanded, diversified, transformed. The ocean had endured the freeze, and in doing so, it remembered how to begin again. Even now, echoes of Snowball Earth remain. Certain microbes still prefer low-oxygen waters. Some deep-sea species carry adaptations shaped by ancient bottlenecks. The balance of carbon and climate still dances on the edge of these ancient lessons, and the memory of a frozen sea still sleeps in the isotopic ratios of old rocks, waiting for those who know how to read them. As you rest now, your breath may begin to slow, like the tide beneath an icy surface, soft and undisturbed. Sleep may come, or not yet. But here, in this cold chapter of the Earth's memory, you are safe to pause. The ocean paused too, not in defeat, but in waiting. There is a kind of strength in stillness, a kind of endurance in patience, the kind that carries life through even the longest winter. The kind that remembers, after the silence of the freeze, the sea began to stir again, not just with motion, but with form. It started slowly, as most great changes do. Simple cells, shaken but not broken by the long chill of Snowball Earth, began to recover. They multiplied, they adapted. And then, over a span of time that seems sudden by geological standards, something remarkable happened. Life began to diversify, not just in chemistry or behavior, but in shape. This was the Cambrian explosion, a time when life in the ocean shifted from invisible to astonishing. Organisms developed hard parts, shells, exoskeletons, plates, and teeth. Predators emerged, alongside prey that learned to hide or run. For the first time, the ocean was filled not just with life, but with strategy. Many of the body plans seen in today's animals were born during this period. The ancestors of arthropods, mollusks, worms, and vertebrates first took recognizable form here. Some were familiar in outline, while others were utterly strange. Long-lobed creatures with eyes on stalks, worm-like hunters with grasping claws, fan-shaped filter feeders anchored to the seafloor. Among the most famous were the trilobites, hard-shelled, many-legged beings that crawled and swam through the sediment. Their fossilized remains are found all over the world, often with fine details preserved, ridges, segments, even compound eyes. They were early explorers in a world of complexity, but they were not alone. Soft-bodied creatures like Opabinia, with its 5 eyes and backward-facing mouth, swam alongside the sleek predator Anomalocaris, whose circular jaw could crush shelled prey. Filter-feeding sponges and simple chordates shared space with burrowers, grazers, and swimmers. The ocean was no longer just a container for life. It had become an ecosystem, layered, crowded, and full of purpose. Fossils from sites like the Burgess Shale in present-day Canada offer a rare glimpse into this time. Buried in an underwater mudslide, these organisms were preserved with astonishing detail. Soft tissues, gills, and internal organs fossilized in rock. They reveal a community of life already full of specialization, already learning the rules of survival. What triggered this sudden bloom remains a subject of study. Perhaps it was the rise of oxygen in the ocean, allowing for more energy-demanding life forms. Perhaps it was the end of the long freeze, unleashing nutrients into warming waters. Perhaps new genetic mechanisms evolved, the first master control genes that could shape body parts and allow experimentation. Whatever the cause, the effect was profound. The Cambrian bloom did not produce giants. Most creatures were small, a few centimeters at most. But they were numerous, diverse, and newly mobile. Some crawled, some swam. Some anchored to the sea floor, others hunted by ambush. The sea, once quiet and still, became alive with movement and interaction. And with interaction came feedback. Predators shaped prey, competition shaped form. Over time, arms races began, spines, shells, faster movement, better sensing. Evolution accelerated, fed by diversity itself. Not all life followed this path. Some ancient lineages continued unchanged in hidden corners, but in the open water and along the seafloor, change became the new norm. This bloom was not a single moment, but a slow unfurling. Over tens of millions of years, life continued to experiment with form and function. Some creatures vanished without a trace, others left descendants that still swim today. Even now, the oceans carry this legacy. The shrimp's armored body, the jellyfish's drifting bell, the scallop's layered shell, all echoes of that original burst of creativity. The ocean remembered the quiet before life. Now, it learned to hold complexity. From the simplicity of early cells came eyes, claws, joints, and nerves. From chemistry came strategy. From drifting came design. And still, the sea cradled it all. In the shallow, sunlit edges of the sea, where waves slow and light filters down like a golden mist, life found a new way to keep time. It built in stone. This is the story of corals, tiny animals with enormous impact. On their own, a single coral polyp is small, soft, almost invisible. But together, over centuries, they form massive reefs, some stretching for thousands of kilometers, visible from space, yet built one generation at a time. These coral reefs are more than beautiful ecosystems. They are natural timekeepers, growing slowly, recording the passing years in the calcium carbonate structures they leave behind. Each coral builds a skeleton, layering mineral upon mineral as it lives and grows. In these skeletons, much like the rings of a tree, are bands that tell a story. Thick bands during warm, bright years, thinner ones during times of stress. Sudden changes in color or density mark floods, bleaching events, even volcanic eruptions that darkened the sky. By extracting core samples from living coral colonies or ancient reef limestone, scientists can read these patterns, not just to date the reef, but to understand the climate of the past. The ratio of oxygen isotopes in coral layers reveals ocean temperatures. Traces of certain elements indicate runoff from land, the acidity of the water, or the arrival of El Niño events. In this way, corals do not just reflect time, they capture it, archiving decades to centuries of ocean history in a structure as delicate as it is strong. The growth of coral is influenced by the moon, too. Tides and lunar cycles affect feeding and reproduction. Some corals release their eggs and sperm in synchronized waves, guided by moonlight and temperature. The timing is so precise that entire reefs can spawn within minutes of each other, once a year, under a rising full moon. This connection to rhythm, solar, lunar, seasonal, makes coral a living clock, one that ticks not with gears but with light, calcium, and patience. But coral reefs are not just passive recorders, they are architects of ecosystems. Their branching arms and porous stones create shelter for thousands of marine species. Fish, mollusks, crustaceans, worms, even marine mammals that visit their fringes. Reefs act as nurseries, fortresses, and feeding grounds. They buffer coastlines from storms. They help shape the chemistry of nearby waters. And yet, despite their strength, they are fragile. A slight change in temperature, even just 1 or 2 degrees, can cause corals to bleach, expelling the symbiotic algae that give them color and energy. Bleached corals are not dead, but weakened, vulnerable. If warm conditions persist, they may not recover. Ocean acidification, driven by rising carbon dioxide levels, makes it harder for corals to build their skeletons. Pollution, sedimentation, and destructive fishing practices add to the pressure. Across the world, reefs are declining, some slowly, some all at once, but even in their struggle, they leave a trace. Fossil reefs line the coasts of continents, marking ancient sea levels and forgotten climates. Corals have survived mass extinctions before. Their stones tell of warmer times, colder times, times of abundance and loss. The Great Barrier Reef, vast and still living, contains within its layers a calendar far older than any civilization. And there are deep-water corals too, species that live far below the sunlit zone, growing slowly in the cold and dark, adding millimeter by millimeter to their hidden structures. These corals record not seasonal changes, but the slow pulses of ocean circulation, the shifting balance of nutrients, the whispers of the deep. To listen to a coral is to hear time in mineral. To study its skeleton is to read a letter from the past, written not in language, but in pattern. The ocean has many clocks, but the coral, quietly building its limestone fortress, may be the most beautiful of all. Long before whales sang and sharks patrolled the shallows, the ocean belonged to giants stranger than anything alive today. Some swam with paddle-shaped limbs, others slithered through the water with jaws lined in teeth. Their skeletons, now scattered across cliffs and stone, tell the story of a sea that once roared with power and size. This was the age of marine giants, and the ocean was their stage. The earliest of these creatures emerged not long after the Cambrian bloom, in a world still pulsing with evolutionary energy. Over time, as life adapted to open water, New forms grew larger, more agile, and more complex. The buoyancy of water gave evolution permission to experiment with scale, to build bigger bodies than gravity would allow on land. Among the first ocean titans were the eurypterids, or sea scorpions. Some grew longer than a grown man, with claws for hunting and armor that shimmered like bronze. They prowled shallow seas, stalking trilobites and other early arthropods. Their fossils, found in what is now dry rock, speak of ancient coastlines long since forgotten. Later came the rise of the placoderms, armored fish with crushing jaws and thick plates of bone. One of the most formidable, Dunkleosteus, was a predator like no other. It could open its mouth in milliseconds, creating a vacuum that pulled prey inward, then slammed its bladed jaws shut with enough force to shear through armor. These were not just fish, they were machines of survival. Still later, as reptiles came to dominate the land, others took to the sea. Evolution sculpted their bodies for a return to water. The result was a new wave of giants, sleek, fast, and deadly. Ichthyosaurs looked like modern dolphins, but were reptiles, not mammals. They had enormous eyes, sharp teeth, and the ability to give birth to live young in the water. Some grew longer than a school bus, hunting squid and fish in the open sea. Plesiosaurs, with their long necks and small heads, glided through the water with 4 paddle-like limbs, moving like birds underwater. They appeared gentle in shape, but were ambush predators, snapping sideways to seize their prey. And then there were the mosasaurs, apex predators of the late Cretaceous seas, with snake-like bodies, paddle limbs, and jaws lined with backward-curving teeth. They hunted fish, ammonites, and even other marine reptiles. One fossil reveals the stomach contents of a mosasaur, a partially digested shark. These giants dominated their ecosystems. They shaped the food chain. They influenced the evolution of smaller creatures, those that had to hide, harden, or flee. Their presence pushed innovation across the ocean's surface and depths, but none of them remain today. The end Cretaceous extinction, triggered by an asteroid impact, swept them away. The mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, and ichthyosaurs vanished. What followed was silence. And then, once more, transformation. New giants rose. Mammals, once small and landbound, returned to the sea. Over millions of years, they became whales, the largest animals the world has ever known. Unlike the reptiles before them, whales used lungs, sang to one another, and fed in great migrations. Some fed on tiny krill with baleen filters. Others, like orcas and sperm whales, hunted with precision and power. Sharks, too, reached enormous sizes. The legendary megalodon, now extinct, may have grown longer than a city bus, with teeth the size of a human hand. Its prey likely included whales and other sharks. The ocean once again echoed with scale and strength. Yet even today, among living creatures, traces of ancient giants remain. The body plans, hunting strategies, and internal structures of many modern marine animals carry echoes of those lost eras. The ocean remembers, not just in fossils or sediments, but in the continuity of form, in the way a fish darts, in the shape of a dolphin's fin, in the heavy grace of a whale turning beneath the surface. The sea has always made room for giants, and each one, whether shelled, scaled, or skinned, left a wake that shaped everything around it. It began in silence, far above the ocean's surface, in the emptiness of space. A rock the size of a mountain hurtled toward Earth. It struck with such force that the world changed in a matter of minutes. This was not just a catastrophe on land. The ocean suffered too, deeply, violently, and lastingly. This is the story of the asteroid impact that ended the age of the dinosaurs. But more than that, it is the story of how the ocean remembered the event, not with noise or fire, but in layers, chemistry, and silence. The impact site lies near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula, in a shallow sea that once stretched across much of the region. When the asteroid struck, it released more energy than all the world's nuclear weapons combined. Water instantly vaporized. Rock turned to gas. A crater over 100 kilometers wide formed in seconds. Tsunamis, taller than buildings, raced across the sea. They slammed into coastlines thousands of kilometers away, pulling forests into the deep and scattering marine life across the seafloor. Waves circled the globe. Even in the deepest parts of the ocean, the water trembled. Then came the fire. Debris thrown into the atmosphere rained down as molten rock. The sky glowed red, then blackened. Soot and ash blotted out the Sunday. For months, maybe years, darkness lingered. Without sunlight, photosynthesis stopped. In the oceans, phytoplankton, the base of the food chain, began to die, and with them, the creatures that fed on them, and those that fed on them. The collapse was not just on land. It rippled through the water column, from the surface to the deepest trench. Entire ecosystems failed. Coral reefs turned pale and crumbled. Ammonites, coiled-shelled cousins of squid, vanished completely. The great marine reptiles, like the mosasaurs, disappeared. Only a fraction of marine life survived, mostly in deep or protected environments. Those that did adapt had to change quickly, finding new sources of energy, new ways to feed, new rhythms to match the altered world. The ocean holds the memory of this day in a thin layer of clay found in sediment cores around the world. This layer, often just a few centimeters thick, contains a rare metal called iridium, common in asteroids but rare on Earth's surface. It also holds shocked quartz, tektites, and soot, physical traces of impact, fire, and fallout. This is the line in stone that divides two worlds, before and after. Above the iridium layer, fossils change, diversity declines, shells shrink, complexity fades, then slowly rebuilds. This line is called the KPG boundary, short for Cretaceous-Paleogene, and it marks the end of one era and the beginning of another. It is sharp, clear, universal, a planetary scar. And yet, even after such devastation, the ocean continued. Life returned, as it always had. Slowly, plankton began to bloom again. Filter feeders repopulated the shallows. Coral larvae drifted and settled on bare rock. New fish emerged, and with them, new predators. Mammals eventually entered the sea, and whales began their long journey to dominance. The ocean had cried out, in flood, in fire, in silence. But it did not give up. It recorded the trauma, then moved forward. Today, when we study sediment cores, we find the iridium layer like a thread running through the planet's memory. The ocean does not exaggerate. It does not speculate. It preserves. Every ripple, every loss, every recovery is held in its quiet layers. Even extinction becomes part of the archive. The ocean is never still. Even when its surface appears flat and calm, its waters are moving, driven by temperature, salt, and gravity, circulating through hidden paths that span the globe. These movements are more than mechanical. They are memory in motion. This is the story of the ocean's great conveyor belts, the thermohaline currents that stir the deep and link distant seas together in a silent, steady rhythm that takes centuries to complete. Thermo refers to temperature, haline refers to salt. Together, these forces drive the sinking and rising of water across the ocean's depths. Warm water from the equator travels toward the poles. There, cooled by icy winds and made denser by evaporating fresh water or sea ice formation, it sinks into the abyss. This cold water then creeps along the seafloor, slowly flowing back toward the equator, until it rises again in upwelling zones, completing a loop that moves more than just water. It moves memory. A parcel of water that sinks in the North Atlantic may not rise again for hundreds of years. In that time, it carries with it chemical signatures, the fingerprint of the atmosphere it last touched, the nutrients it absorbed, the warmth or cold it knew. These currents act like a long-term delivery system for oxygen, heat, and nutrients, shaping everything from regional climates to the growth of microscopic life. This global circulation system is sometimes called the ocean conveyor belt, and it connects all major ocean basins: Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, Southern, and Arctic. But it is not constant. It has slowed and shifted in the past, especially during ice ages or abrupt climate changes. When it does, the Earth responds. During the last glacial period, these deep currents weakened. Polar waters freshened from melting ice, preventing the usual sinking. Climate models suggest this disruption led to rapid shifts in weather, especially in the northern hemisphere. Some regions cooled dramatically in just a few decades. Rainfall patterns moved, forests changed. Civilizations long after would feel the echoes of those hidden changes in the sea. The ocean remembers these shifts. In sediment layers, scientists find sudden changes in isotope ratios, fossil plankton, and trace elements. These markers reveal how ocean circulation changed and how quickly. The data show that the ocean is not only powerful, it is sensitive, and it has always responded to imbalance by finding a new pattern, a new rhythm, a new way forward. Even the creatures of the sea depend on this movement. Tiny plankton in the sunlit surface layer feed on nutrients brought up from the depths. When these currents stall, entire food chains falter. Coral reefs bleach, fish migrations change, and the quiet language of temperature and salt shifts yet again. Today, as fresh water from melting glaciers enters the North Atlantic, scientists watch the conveyor belt closely. They measure salinity, track deep water formation, and model future shifts. The ocean, after all, has seen disruption before, but never with the added burden of so much carbon dioxide, so much heat, in such a short time. Still, the memory moves. In every drop of seawater there is a story, of where it came from, of what it carried, of what it left behind. Some parts of the ocean are younger, just returned from the surface. Others are ancient, resting deep in the Pacific, untouched for centuries. They move without sound, without hurry. They remember. And as your breath begins to slow, as your body settles deeper into stillness, you might begin to feel a similar rhythm. Steady, circulating, calm, your own quiet current, flowing gently within. The ocean has always moved like this. Not to arrive, but to balance. Not to dominate, but to preserve. Let your thoughts drift now, like a slow current beneath the ice. There is time. The ocean moves in centuries. Tonight, you only need to rest. Far below the waves, in the twilight and midnight zones where sunlight cannot reach, the ocean speaks. It does not speak with words. It does not shout or whisper in ways a human might recognize, but it speaks nonetheless, in rhythms, pulses, vibrations, and harmonics. This is the language of the deep, and it has echoed through the water long before ears evolved to hear it. Sound travels faster in water than in air. It also travels farther. The density of seawater allows vibrations to carry with remarkable clarity, sometimes across entire ocean basins. In this dark world, where light is lost within meters, sound becomes the primary form of communication, orientation, and perception. Whales are among the most well-known speakers of the deep. The long, low calls of blue whales can travel thousands of kilometers. Humpbacks compose complex songs with repeating patterns and variations, songs that can last for hours. These songs change over time, pass through populations like musical dialects. In some regions, every male sings the same evolving tune, each season building on the last. Sperm whales click in precise patterns called codas. These bursts of sound are thought to identify individuals or family groups and may carry information about identity or intent. The clicks are also used in echolocation, allowing the whales to map the dark around them with extraordinary accuracy. But the deep is not only the realm of giants. Snapping shrimp, tiny crustaceans only a few centimeters long, create one of the loudest natural sounds in the ocean. With a sudden snap of their claw, they generate a cavitation bubble that collapses with a sharp crack, stunning prey, and sending a sharp sound wave into the water. Entire colonies can sound like distant crackling fires. Fish hum, grunt, drum, and pop. Many species use their swim bladders like drums, vibrating muscles to produce low-frequency sounds during mating or territorial disputes. Some reefs are so filled with fish vocalizations that they form a continuous ambient hum, a kind of underwater dawn chorus. Cephalopods, like squid and octopuses, are thought to use color and gesture more than sound, but the deep remains full of unknowns. It is entirely possible that other forms of acoustic signaling exist beyond our current understanding. Scientists have begun to study these soundscapes in detail, deploying underwater microphones called hydrophones across the seafloor. These instruments reveal a world alive with information: the creaking of icebergs, the rumble of distant earthquakes, the slow groan of moving tectonic plates. The ocean is never truly silent. Even human-made sounds leave a mark. Ship engines, sonar, and seismic surveys add layers of noise that can overwhelm natural communication. For some animals, this interference can be fatal. Whales have stranded themselves during sonar testing. Fish abandon breeding grounds disturbed by constant low-frequency rumble. The ocean's voice is being altered, reshaped not by evolution, but by machinery. Still, there are places where the natural language holds steady. In protected marine reserves, reef soundscapes have been used to monitor ecosystem health. A vibrant reef sounds busy, full of snaps, hums, and rustles. A dying reef falls quiet. Restored reefs, when healthy, begin to speak again, their soundscapes returning with the fish and invertebrates that once built them. Some researchers have begun to play recordings of healthy reefs in damaged areas, drawing fish back to silent zones. Sound, it turns out, is not just a sign of life, it can help rebuild it. The language of the deep is layered. It is biological, geological, and atmospheric. It includes the clicks of dolphins, the tremble of distant landslides, the songs of baleen whales, and the hiss of rising methane bubbles. It tells of hunger, territory, mating, warning, navigation, memory, and unlike light, it surrounds. A fish may never see its predator, but it may hear the change in pressure, the approaching rhythm, the warning pulse. The deep ocean, hidden from view, has always been full of voices. We are only just beginning to listen. Beneath the ocean, there is fire. It does not blaze like a forest or roar like a furnace. It moves slowly, deeply, in chambers of molten rock and hidden heat. This is the fire that shapes the earth from the inside, the fire of undersea volcanoes, the builders of crust, the breathers of heat, the quiet sculptors of the seafloor. The ocean hides most of the world's volcanic activity, not on islands or coastal ridges, but along the vast mid-ocean ridges that wind like seams around the planet. These underwater mountain ranges are not still. They are dynamic zones where tectonic plates pull apart, and magma rises to fill the gap. The seafloor is born here, again and again, inch by inch, in darkness. When the molten rock reaches the seawater, it cools instantly. The result is a strange formation known as pillow lava, rounded, blister-like shapes stacked one upon the other, formed as the hot rock is quenched by the cold deep sea. This silent process happens across tens of thousands of kilometers, creating new crust that slowly spreads away from the ridge. Elsewhere, in deeper regions or near subduction zones, magma pushes through existing crust to form volcanic peaks. Some break the surface, forming islands. Others remain submerged, rising like submerged mountains with flat tops, ancient volcanoes weathered by waves, and then drowned as the seafloor shifted beneath them. One of the most fascinating features born of this deep fire is the hydrothermal vent. These are chimneys, often several meters tall, that release superheated water rich with minerals. The water is not boiling because it is compressed by the immense pressure at depth. It is dark, metallic, infused with sulfides, and bursting from beneath the crust at temperatures that would destroy life on land. And yet, around these vents, life flourishes. Bacteria feed on the chemicals in the water. Chemosynthesis, not photosynthesis, is their energy source. Tube worms, clams, shrimp, and strange blind crabs cluster in colonies that thrive in the pitch black, warmed by the Earth's heat. These are ecosystems that do not need the sunday. They exist in complete independence from the surface world. Some scientists believe life on Earth may have begun in places just like this, sheltered, stable, chemically rich. Even today, hydrothermal vent communities represent an alternate version of life's story, one rooted not in light, but in heat and stone. Volcanoes beneath the ocean shape more than just the land. They influence ocean chemistry, releasing metals and gases that affect nutrient cycles. Their eruptions, though often unseen, can be powerful. Some create plumes of ash that rise to the surface. Others shift entire slopes of seamounts, triggering underwater landslides and sending waves across the sea. The ocean, ever patient, receives this heat and movement, adding it to its memory. And still, the fire moves. Today, scientists monitor undersea volcanoes with seismographs, temperature sensors, and remotely operated vehicles. But much remains unknown. Most of these peaks lie uncharted. Many eruptions go unnoticed. The deep keeps its secrets. Even now, as you rest, the ocean's floor is rising somewhere. A crack widens. A pulse of magma reaches stone. A new layer is formed. It is a reminder that the world is always being remade, even in its quietest places. Let your body grow still now, like cooled basalt beneath the waves. Let your thoughts settle, one layer at a time. If sleep comes, let it rise gently from below, carrying warmth like an undersea current. The fire beneath the sea does not rage. It waits. It builds. It breathes slow heat into the coldest places. And the ocean, wrapped in shadow, remembers every flame. The ocean is a keeper of balance, not only of tides and temperatures, but of something more elusive, carbon. Carbon flows through the atmosphere, the land, and all living things. But it is in the ocean that this element finds its greatest reservoir, held in forms visible and invisible, stable and shifting. The ocean acts as both storehouse and accountant, taking in carbon, using it, locking it away, or releasing it back into the air. This silent accounting system is called the ocean's carbon cycle, and it operates on timescales that stretch from seconds to centuries. At the surface, carbon dioxide from the atmosphere dissolves into seawater. The process is simple but essential. The air and sea exchange gases based on concentration, temperature, and wind. Colder water holds more gas, so polar seas absorb more carbon than tropical ones. As carbon dioxide dissolves, it reacts with water to form carbonic acid, bicarbonate, and carbonate ions, each a different chapter in the story. These dissolved forms of carbon are not static. Phytoplankton, the microscopic plants of the ocean, use them during photosynthesis. With sunlight as energy, they turn carbon dioxide into organic matter, sugars, lipids, proteins, that feed the rest of the marine food web. When plankton are eaten, or when they die, that carbon moves upward into predators or downward into the deep. Some of this sinking material becomes marine snow, a slow drift of particles made of dead plankton, fecal matter, and tiny shells. This snow falls for days, sometimes weeks, before reaching the ocean floor. Along the way, it feeds deep-sea creatures. What remains eventually becomes sediment, locking away carbon for thousands or even millions of years. This process is part of the biological pump, a conveyor of carbon from surface to seafloor. It helps regulate atmospheric carbon dioxide levels, stabilizes climate, and allows Earth to remain habitable. But there is another ledger, deeper still. Carbon also interacts with the carbonate system, a balance between carbonic acid, bicarbonate, and carbonate ions that buffers the ocean's pH. This system resists rapid changes in acidity, keeping marine chemistry within a livable range. Coral reefs, shellfish, and many plankton rely on carbonate ions to build their shells and skeletons. But this balance is delicate. As more carbon dioxide enters the ocean from the atmosphere, more carbonic acid forms. The result is ocean acidification, a slow, steady drop in pH that makes it harder for organisms to calcify. Shells become thinner, reefs grow more slowly, larvae of many marine species struggle to survive. This is not the ocean's fault. It is doing what it has always done, absorbing carbon to buffer the climate. But the scale and speed of modern emissions are overwhelming its systems. What once took thousands of years is now unfolding in decades. Still, the ocean holds the memory of balance. In ancient sediment layers, scientists find evidence of past carbon shifts, massive volcanic events, asteroid impacts, long cooling periods. In each, the ocean responded, sometimes slowly, sometimes with upheaval, but always with an effort to return to equilibrium. Corals record past acidity in their skeletons. Ice cores show how carbon moved between ocean and air during ice ages. Isotope ratios in tiny shells reveal changes in the deep ocean's ability to store and transport carbon. The story is written in code, but it is there for those who learn to read it. And it is not all loss. Seagrass meadows, mangroves, and salt marshes also store carbon efficiently in what is known as blue carbon. These ecosystems bury organic matter in oxygen-poor sediments, preventing its return to the atmosphere. They are small in area, but powerful in effect. The ocean's carbon ledger is not a warning alone. It is also a map, one that shows what works, what heals, what endures. It reminds us that the balance of life is written not only in creatures and color, but in chemistry. And that, even in the depths, far from the reach of air or light, the Earth is still writing its carbon story, quietly, patiently, molecule by molecule. Twice each day, everywhere along the shore, the ocean rises and falls, not with violence or chaos, but with rhythm, slow, steady, eternal. This motion is so familiar that it often fades into the background of our awareness. Yet, it is among the most ancient and reliable forces on Earth. The tides are Earth's breath, a pulse not of blood, but of water. They are caused by the gravitational relationship between the Earth, Moon, and Sunday. The Moon, though small compared to the Sun, is closer, and so it exerts a stronger pull on the Earth's oceans. As the Moon moves through the sky, it pulls the water slightly toward it, creating a bulge, a high tide. On the opposite side of the planet, another bulge forms due to the Earth's motion around this gravitational tug. Between these two bulges, water recedes, forming low tides. This interplay creates a rhythm of rising and falling, repeating roughly every 12.5 hours. When the Sun and Moon align, during new and full moons, their gravitational forces combine to create especially high and low tides, known as spring tides. When they form a right angle, during the first and third quarters of the Moon, the result is neap tides, smaller in range. But the ocean doesn't respond to gravity alone. It listens to shape, coastlines, ocean depth, and the contours of seafloors all affect how tides behave. In narrow bays or long estuaries, the tidal range can be amplified dramatically. In the Bay of Fundy, for instance, tides can rise and fall by more than 15 meters, turning calm coves into roaring rivers in a matter of hours. Tides are not just surface movements. They reach deep into the sea. The energy transferred by tidal motion stirs the ocean, mixes nutrients, and helps regulate temperature. In the deep ocean, internal tides ripple through density layers, redistributing heat and matter in ways that shape ecosystems. Marine life has evolved to match this rhythm. Some species of crabs, worms, and fish spawn only during particular phases of the tide. Shorebirds time their feeding to the moment the water pulls back and exposes mudflats rich with invertebrates. Coral reefs synchronize mass spawning events with tides, moon phases, and water temperature, releasing eggs and sperm into the sea in vast, coordinated waves. Even plants like mangroves and seagrasses depend on tidal flow, which brings nutrients, disperses seeds, and clears waste. Salt marshes flood and drain in tune with the tide, cycling carbon and building sediment layers that preserve ecological history. For humans, tides have long been a guide and a challenge. Ancient mariners learned to read them, harnessing their pull to aid travel or avoid danger. Fishermen still rely on tide charts to know when to cast nets or set traps. Coastal builders must plan with precision, as the boundary between land and sea is constantly shifting. But tides also hold deeper meaning. To many cultures, they represent connection between the earth and sky, the present and the ancient, the visible and the hidden. Poets and philosophers have long seen in the tide a symbol of return, of letting go, of inevitable change. And tides are changing too. As sea levels rise, the reach of high tides grows. Some cities now flood during so-called sunny days, when no storm is present, just an especially high tide washing over the edge of what was once stable ground. Changes in wind, pressure, and even ice melt can alter tidal patterns in subtle but accumulating ways. Still, the tide continues, No clock ticks more faithfully. No force is more humble and more powerful at once. The same movement that rocks the shell in a tide pool lifts entire oceans. To watch the tide is to observe time itself, written in water. It moves not to arrive, but to return. Again, and again, and again. The ocean has witnessed many extinctions, but one was greater than all the rest. It happened long before dinosaurs roamed, before flowers bloomed, before birds filled the skies. Around 250 million years ago, the Earth changed so violently, so thoroughly, that it nearly reset life itself. This event is known as the Permian-Triassic extinction, or more ominously, the Great Dying. It is estimated that over 90% of marine species vanished. Reefs collapsed. Entire branches of the evolutionary tree disappeared. On land, forests withered, insects declined, and mammals barely held on. But it was in the ocean that the devastation struck hardest and deepest. For years, the cause of this mass death remained a mystery. There was no asteroid crater like the one that ended the reign of the dinosaurs. But deep in the rock record, scientists found clues. Abrupt changes in carbon isotopes, the disappearance of fossilized shells, and a dark, soot-filled layer, marking the collapse of ecosystems. Now, most evidence points to an event that began not from the sky, but from the Earth's interior. Massive volcanic eruptions in what is now Siberia released enormous amounts of carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. The climate warmed rapidly, ocean temperatures rose, oxygen levels in the sea plummeted. The chemistry of life began to unravel. As the ocean warmed, its layers stopped mixing. The deep grew stagnant. Without circulation, oxygen could not reach the depths. Microbes that thrived in anoxic conditions multiplied, releasing hydrogen sulfide, a gas toxic to most life. Coral reefs dissolved, shells weakened, whole food chains collapsed. The ocean turned against its own inhabitants, not by intention, but by imbalance. This wasn't a single, violent moment. It unfolded over tens of thousands of years, a slow-motion catastrophe written into every current and sediment layer. It was enough time for creatures to attempt adaptation, and still, most failed. Ammonites, trilobites, ancient corals, and countless other marine forms disappeared forever. Even planktonic life, the base of the oceanic food web, suffered catastrophic losses. With them fell the towering chain of predators above. The seafloor bears the scars. In drill cores, there are sudden interruptions in fossil presence. Layers of black shale mark the spread of oxygen-deprived waters. Some areas show strange microbial mats replacing once rich seafloor communities, evidence of life struggling to reassert itself after everything else was lost. But eventually, life returned. In the aftermath of the Great Dying, new forms emerged. Some survivors adapted to warmer, more acidic waters. New groups of fish and mollusks took the place of those lost, and from these crucibles of destruction came the ancestors of many modern marine animals. The ocean remembered what worked and what didn't. Today, this ancient extinction is more than a story. It is a warning. The conditions that contributed to it, warming, acidification, loss of oxygen, are all happening again, now, under human influence. But unlike the past, this time the trigger isn't slow volcanic change. It's happening in decades. The ocean holds the memory of balance and of collapse. It knows how close the line can be between abundance and absence. It has already lived through the worst, but it also teaches that recovery is possible, though it takes not decades, not centuries, but millions of years. To study the Great Dying is not to dwell on despair, but to understand the ocean's limits and its power to heal. It is a story of endings, yes, but also of beginnings that no one could have predicted. The ocean went dark, and still, it came back. If the ocean had a fingerprint, it would be salt. Every wave that touches your lips, every drop that evaporates and leaves a trace on your skin, carries the memory of minerals dissolved long ago. The saltiness of seawater is not incidental. It is a signature, a chemical memory etched across billions of years. When Earth was young, it rained for ages. Water vapor from the cooling atmosphere condensed into torrential storms that lasted millennia. This water fell onto hot, barren rock, slowly carving rivers, dissolving elements from the crust, and carrying them into the first basins. Those dissolved elements, mostly sodium and chloride, accumulated. Unlike gases that escape or solids that sink, these ions remained in solution. Over time, the ocean became salty, and it has stayed that way ever since. The salt in the sea is stable in concentration, but not stagnant in motion. Rivers still bring in minerals every day, but the ocean removes them in balance. Some settle as sediment. Others are absorbed by organisms or locked into shell and bone. The system is dynamic, yet remarkably consistent. For every ton of salt added, another is stored, buried, or cycled out. Today, seawater contains about 3.5% dissolved salts, not just sodium chloride, but magnesium, calcium, potassium, sulfate, and trace elements like iron, zinc, and copper. Each ion plays a role not just in chemistry but in biology. Marine creatures are built in harmony with salt. Fish regulate salinity through specialized cells in their gills. Crustaceans need calcium and magnesium to build exoskeletons. Corals pull carbonate ions from water to construct their limestone homes. Even plankton rely on trace metals to drive the reactions of life. The saltiness of the ocean defines the thresholds of life. Too much salt, as in enclosed basins like the Dead Sea, and few organisms can survive. Too little, as in fresh or brackish water, and marine species must adapt or perish. Each habitat has its salinity, fingerprint, and even small changes can reshape entire ecosystems. Oceanographers measure salinity constantly, using satellites, buoys, and deep-sea sensors. Changes in salinity help scientists understand patterns of evaporation, rainfall, ice melt, and ocean circulation. In some regions, warming has made the sea saltier by increasing evaporation. In others, glacial melt and rainfall have freshened the water. These subtle shifts can affect not just weather, but climate. Salinity influences density, and density drives currents. Where warm, salty water meets cold, fresh water, you find the engines of thermohaline circulation, the global conveyor belt that moves heat around the planet. Salt also records history. In trapped basins, salt layers known as evaporites tell of ancient seas that dried away. The Mediterranean, for instance, nearly vanished 6 million years ago, leaving behind thick deposits of salt that now lie beneath the seafloor. When the ocean finally breached the Straits of Gibraltar again, it roared in like a flood, refilling the basin in what may have been just a few short years, a cataclysmic event recorded not in myth, but in salt and stone. There are places in the deep sea, brine pools, where salinity is so high that denser, saltier water forms a kind of underwater lake. These pools have their own shorelines, waves, and currents. And in their alien chemistry, life still exists, strange, adapted, patient. Salt is not just flavor or preservative. It is structure, it is signal, it is story, and it is old. Each grain of sea salt on your tongue is a mineral that may have once sat inside a mountain, broken loose by rain, carried by rivers, and folded into the endless motion of tides. It is, in a sense, time made soluble. The ocean holds it all, without judgment, without preference. Just memory, suspended in water. They are invisible to the eye but essential to life. Floating in the sunlit surface of the sea, plankton are the ocean's breath, tiny organisms that fill the water with movement, color, and chemistry. The word plankton comes from the Greek planktos, meaning drifter or wanderer, and that is what they are. Organisms too small or delicate to swim against the currents, carried wherever the ocean flows. But their influence is anything but passive. There are two main kinds of plankton. Phytoplankton, the plant-like drifters that photosynthesize, and zooplankton, the animal-like creatures that feed on them. Together, they form the base of the oceanic food web and the foundation of life on Earth. Phytoplankton absorb sunlight and carbon dioxide and release oxygen into the water and the air. In fact, they are responsible for producing more than half of the world's oxygen, more than all forests combined. Every second breath we take owes itself to their quiet, ceaseless work. Under the microscope, phytoplankton appear as delicate chains, spirals, and geometric shapes, diatoms encased in glassy silica shells, dinoflagellates with whirling tails, coccolithophores plated in intricate limestone discs. They are as diverse as they are beautiful. They bloom when conditions are right: sunlight, nutrients, and calm waters. From space, these blooms appear as swirling green-blue clouds stretching across the sea's surface. Some are harmless, feeding fish and whales. Others become harmful algal blooms, releasing toxins that can poison marine life and disrupt ecosystems. But most of the time, plankton go about their work in silence. Each day, in what scientists call the largest migration on Earth, zooplankton rise from the depths at dusk to feed on phytoplankton near the surface, then sink again before dawn to avoid predators. This vertical dance, up by night, down by day, moves carbon, nutrients, and energy through the layers of the sea. When plankton die, or when they are eaten and excreted, their remains sink. Some become part of the marine snow, drifting gently to the seafloor. Others are broken down by bacteria, recycling nutrients for the next generation of life. Plankton are also sensitive recorders of change. Their populations shift with temperature, acidity, and nutrient availability. In warming waters, species adapted to cold are retreating toward the poles, replaced by smaller, faster-growing varieties. These changes ripple up the food web, affecting everything from fish to whales to people. Fossilized plankton, preserved in sediment cores, offer a window into Earth's past. Their shells record isotopes that tell of ancient temperatures, carbon cycles, and even ice ages. A centimeter of mud can hold thousands of years of plankton memory, pressed into silence but still readable. Even oil, the thick black liquid that fuels engines and economies, began, in many cases, as plankton. Over millions of years, their remains were buried, compressed, and transformed into hydrocarbons. Every drop of crude oil is a fossil echo of a once-living bloom. Despite their power, plankton are vulnerable. Pollution, warming, acidification, and changes in ocean currents all affect their balance. Yet they continue, blooming, drifting, feeding, sinking, in a cycle older than humanity. And they connect everything, from the whale that feeds on krill, to the seabird hunting anchovies, to the breath you just took. All trace their lifeline back to plankton. These drifting specks hold up the world, molecule by molecule, breath by breath. In the vastness of the sea, it's easy to overlook what cannot be seen. But the ocean does not measure worth by size. It remembers what sustains. And in plankton, it finds the pulse of life itself. There is a time when the sea quiets, not in sound, but in rhythm. The sun dips below the horizon, and the surface cools. Light fades from the waves, and the ocean enters a kind of rest, not sleep as we know it, but a shift into a different mode of being. In that darkness, something curious happens. The ocean begins to dream in motion. Internal waves ripple along density boundaries beneath the surface. Tiny creatures rise from the depths. Bioluminescent flashes blink like stars below. Whales sing in low, echoing tones that can travel for hundreds of kilometers, their calls like lullabies in liquid air. The world above is sleeping, but the ocean never stops. And yet, it understands rest, not as stillness, but as slowness, as recalibration. Just as we let go of the day when our heads touch the pillow, the sea lets go of the sun, returning to its deeper, quieter patterns. Surface turbulence yields to deep currents. Heat gives way to cold. Energy folds inward. It is during this time that scientists observe subtle shifts in behavior. Some species hide, others emerge. Coral polyps extend their tentacles, feeding in the dark. Squid rise like shadows through the water column, chasing prey that floated up in twilight. If you could float there, motionless, just beneath the surface, you might feel the sea breathing around you. Slow currents curling past your skin, warm layers pressing into cool ones, the far-off churn of waves you can't see. Your heart might slow to match. Your thoughts might soften, Because even if the ocean never truly sleeps, it still carries the same rhythm we do, of activity and rest, of intensity and quiet. Perhaps that's why, when we listen to waves or dive beneath the surface, something in us relaxes. The ocean mirrors something inside us. Its movements are not so different from breath, or emotion, or thought. Each wave a pulse, each current a mood, and when we allow ourselves to drift, even in imagination, into that rhythm, our bodies respond. So if tonight your mind is still turning, if thoughts won't quite settle, let the ocean hold them. Let them rise and fall like tide and spray, coming and going without force. The sea has always known how to carry what we cannot. It has carried the memory of extinction and bloom, of heat and ice, of silence and thunder. It has absorbed our carbon, our storms, our salt, and still, it moves with grace. Still, it invites us to let go. Let go of your name for a moment. Let go of the weight behind your eyes. Let the tension in your jaw drift outward, like foam breaking on shore. You do not have to sleep immediately, but you may rest. You may float. The ocean will not pull you down. It will rock you, not with waves, but with knowledge. Not with lullabies, but with quiet presence. In this moment, you are not separate from it. The same salt runs in your blood. The same water makes up your cells. The ocean is not just a place, it is a part of you, and you are a part of it. So close your eyes, if they wish to close. Breathe once more, deeply. Let the sea dream for you. There is a silence that lives in ice, not the silence of stillness, but the silence of waiting. In the far reaches of the planet, where light arrives at a slant and time stretches long, the ocean meets its coldest memory, ice. Not just surface frost or seasonal freeze, but ancient, towering structures, glaciers, ice sheets, frozen shelves, where seawater and time conspire to hold the world in place. But ice is not lifeless. It moves. It breathes. It remembers. At the poles, the ocean and the cryosphere, Earth's frozen domain, are entwined. The cold drives currents. Ice locks up fresh water. When it melts, it tells stories written long ago. Take Antarctica. Beneath its thickest glaciers, water lies trapped. Not in the air, not in clouds, but beneath kilometers of ice, slowly leaking into the Southern Ocean. And in the Arctic, sea ice grows and retreats with the seasons, changing the reflectivity of the planet itself. More ice, more light bounces back into space. Less ice, and the sea absorbs more heat. A delicate feedback loop, finely tuned. But the most astonishing thing is this: the ocean shapes the ice, and the ice shapes the ocean. Warm currents creep under ice shelves, thinning them from below. This water doesn't feel warm to us. It's near freezing, but it's just enough above zero to erode the base, to loosen ancient anchors holding back glaciers. When that happens, rivers of ice begin to flow faster toward the sea. And when they do, sea levels rise. Not immediately, not dramatically, but steadily. A meter here, a few centimeters there. Over decades, this changes coastlines, floods, estuaries, alters salinity in deltas, and even shifts weather far inland. The ice holds a kind of memory that's different from the ocean's flowing one. It's a compressed archive. Trapped in its layers are bubbles of ancient air, snapshots of the atmosphere from hundreds of thousands of years ago. Scientists drill deep cores from Greenland and Antarctica to study them, revealing how carbon levels, temperatures, and sea ice have shifted across ice ages. Some of those records tell of sudden changes, warmings that took place in just decades. Ice melts, oceans surge, weather patterns reorganize, and then new balance is found. We like to think of ice as fragile, melting too quickly under modern heat. But it's also incredibly resilient. After all, it has returned after every warming in Earth's history. It reforms, regrows, reclaims. Yet the ice of today holds a tension. It is still here, vast, glittering, magnificent, but it's thinner, more fractured. In the Arctic, multi-year ice is disappearing. In West Antarctica, some glaciers are past their tipping point. These are not just local shifts, they affect global currents, salinity gradients, and the very structure of the ocean itself. As ice melts, fresh water pours into the sea. This dilutes salt levels, which in turn affects thermohaline circulation, the deep, slow-moving conveyor belts that move heat around the globe. If these patterns change too much, climates could shift in places far from any glacier or pole. And yet, even now, there are parts of the ocean that cradle ice without threat. In deep fjords and shaded channels, ancient glaciers still carve quietly into waiting waters. Icebergs drift, majestic and slow, dissolving inch by inch, releasing minerals that feed plankton and stir up life. The ice, like the ocean, participates in the cycle of life. When it melts, it is not lost. It becomes current. It becomes cloud. It joins the breath of the planet. And eventually, it may freeze again. If not in your lifetime, then in some distant future, when Earth exhales once more into cold. The ocean does not forget the shape of ice. It remembers every edge, every plunge, every melt. And the ice? It remembers how to wait. There is a language older than words, spoken not in syllables or sounds, but in motion. A rhythm pulled from the sky and written across the water, the tide. Twice a day, without fail, the ocean rises and falls, pressed gently by the gravitational pull of the moon, and more distantly the Sunday. These movements are not just mechanical, they are poetic. Predictable, yes, charted, mapped, modeled, but still somehow mysterious in their persistence. The tides are the heartbeat of the sea. At high tide, water presses into the coastlines, creeps up estuaries, fills salt marshes. At low tide, it retreats, revealing sandbars, tidal pools, and the secret life beneath the surface. Shorebirds feed, crabs scurry, seaweeds stretch and sigh, and in between, that quiet moment of stillness, the sea seems to pause, as if taking a breath. What causes this pull? The moon's gravity draws the water toward it, creating a bulge. At the same time, inertia from Earth's spin creates a second bulge on the opposite side. As the Earth rotates through these bulges, any given point on the planet experiences the rise and fall of the tide. Where land narrows or deepens, tides become more dramatic. In places like the Bay of Fundy, tides can reach over 15 meters, a moving wall of ocean that surges in, then flows back like breath drawn and released. But tides are not only surface motion. They push currents, stir nutrients, and affect marine life cycles. Some fish spawn by the rhythm of the tide. Coral reefs synchronize their reproductive cycles to the lunar calendar, releasing eggs and sperm during specific tidal windows. Even the movements of plankton and predators above are shaped by this quiet pulse. Tides shape coastlines over centuries. They smooth stones. They carve cliffs. They build sand dunes and estuarine sanctuaries. The coast is never fixed. It is an ever-changing dance between water, wind, and time. More than anything, the tide is a reminder that motion doesn't always come from within. Sometimes, we are moved by distant things, invisible, quiet, and far away, like the moon, barely noticed in daylight, yet guiding the sea with ancient precision. If you've ever walked along the shore and felt the water chase your feet, retreat, then return again, you've felt the intimacy of this connection. It is not loud, it does not demand, it simply persists, and in this rhythm, there is reassurance. A pulse, not of a single being, but of the entire planet. A movement that ties deep-sea trenches to shallow coves, icy fjords to coral lagoons. Every place touched by the sea feels the same ancient tug. Tides are also messengers. They carry signals of climate change, sea level rise, and glacial melt. As polar ice retreats and water redistributes, tidal patterns shift, subtly but measurably. Scientists track these shifts to monitor coastal vulnerability and predict flooding. A few centimeters of tidal change can alter the balance between land and sea. And still, the tide returns. It has never failed, not once. Through all of Earth's upheavals, supercontinents drifting, mountains rising, meteors striking, the tide has continued its pull. Its rhythm is not ours. It does not keep time by hours or heartbeats. It moves to the music of mass and gravity, in cycles we have only recently begun to understand. But the sea has always known. The tide doesn't forget. It marks every shore, every cove, every inlet, every bay. It leaves a memory of where it's been in salt lines on rocks and driftwood left tangled on the beach. The ocean, moved by the moon, speaks without sound, and the tide is its quietest voice. Beneath the surface, where sunlight fades and silence thickens, the ocean holds its most enduring memories. These memories do not lie in objects or words, but in currents, deep rivers within the sea flowing slowly, constantly, across entire basins and between continents. Unlike surface waves or coastal tides, ocean currents are vast systems shaped by temperature, salinity, wind, and Earth's rotation. Together, they form what scientists call the global conveyor belt, or thermohaline circulation, a vast, interconnected loop that moves heat, salt, and nutrients around the planet. Imagine it: warm water from the equator, drifting toward the poles. As it cools and grows denser, it sinks, sliding along the seafloor like a slow exhale. Cold water from the deep rises elsewhere, bringing nutrients to the surface. This exchange continues without pause, a rhythm too slow for the eye, but powerful enough to shape climates and sustain life. The Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, or AMOC, is one of the strongest limbs of this conveyor belt. It helps keep Europe temperate and pulls tropical heat northward. Yet it is vulnerable. As Greenland's ice melts and fresh water floods into the North Atlantic, salinity drops. Lower salinity means lower density, and lower density means the water may not sink as it once did. If it slows too much, it could disrupt not just regional weather patterns but the entire oceanic memory cycle. These deep currents are not just highways for temperature and salt, they are lifelines for the ocean's ecosystems. As water circulates, it redistributes oxygen, feeds upwelling zones, and carries microscopic nutrients that fuel plankton blooms thousands of kilometers away. In the Pacific, the Kuroshio Current hugs Japan's coast, bringing warm water and rich fishing grounds. Off the coast of South America, the Humboldt Current carries cold, nutrient-rich waters that support some of the planet's most abundant marine life. These currents don't just move, they feed, regulate, balance. Even the deepest trenches, places without light or warmth, are reached eventually by these slow flows. They are touched by molecules that may have started their journey centuries ago. Some water in the deep Atlantic is believed to be over 1,000 years old, still carrying the thermal and chemical imprint of the Arctic where it sank. This is memory, in liquid form. To study these currents, scientists deploy floats, satellites, and deep-sea moorings, tracking tiny shifts in salinity and temperature. From these data, they build models, draw maps, and forecast changes. Yet much remains uncertain. The ocean does not give up its memory easily. Its layers are complex, its paths circuitous, and the currents are changing. Not vanishing, but evolving. As the planet warms, wind patterns shift. Melting glaciers add fresh water to the mix. Rainfall patterns grow less predictable. All of this affects circulation, not just in strength but in timing and structure. In some places, currents are growing stronger. In others, they slow or meander. These changes matter. A delayed current can mean later monsoons, longer droughts, or more violent storms. It can shift migration routes, dissolve coral reefs, or starve fish populations that rely on predictable upwelling zones. Yet, despite its vulnerability, the ocean's circulatory system is resilient. It adapts, it shifts course, it finds new balance. For now, the conveyor belt continues, dragging with it the weight of planetary history. To float within one of these currents, if you could, would be to travel back in time, not to a date or a moment, but to a condition. The pressure of polar seas, the salt of ancient rains, the heat of long-ago suns. Currents do not remember in words. They remember in movement, and so the ocean remembers everything, not in stillness, but in flow. The ocean is never silent. Even in its deepest trenches, far from sunlight and storms, sound moves through the water, a constant hum, a living pulse, a conversation that has never ended. Sound travels faster and farther in water than in air. While light fades quickly beneath the surface, sound becomes the primary language of the sea. Whales use it to sing across entire ocean basins. Dolphins click and whistle with astonishing complexity. Even the snapping of shrimp, tiny creatures barely the size of a fingernail, can fill a reef with crackling static. The sea is filled with voices. Some are natural. The creaking of shifting icebergs, the rolling boom of underwater earthquakes, the rhythmic crashing of waves on distant shores, the gentle rasp of sand stirred by currents. Together, they create what scientists call the soundscape of the sea, an ever-changing, living composition. Other sounds, though, are not born of nature. Since the advent of ships, submarines, and sonar, human noise has entered the depths. Engines, propellers, seismic surveys, military sonar. These artificial intrusions add volume to waters that once knew only wind and life. For marine animals that depend on hearing to hunt, navigate, or find mates, this new layer of noise can be disruptive, even dangerous. A blue whale can communicate with another across thousands of kilometers, or it could, once, today, in some parts of the ocean, human-generated sound masks these ancient calls. Scientists worry that entire species may be losing the ability to stay connected through sound. Yet, even amid the din, the ocean continues to speak. Hydrophones, underwater microphones, allow us to listen in. Placed on the seafloor or suspended from buoys, these instruments capture the murmurs of the deep. From them, we have learned to identify specific whale songs, the bark of seals, the eerie groans of shifting tectonic plates. In 1997, researchers recorded a mysterious sound from the deep Pacific. It was loud, one of the loudest ever captured, and seemed to rise from nowhere. They called it the bloop. For years, theories ranged from giant squid to unknown sea monsters. Eventually, it was traced to icequakes, massive cracking events as icebergs broke apart. Even so, its mystery captured the imagination. What else lies beneath, speaking in tongues we do not yet understand? Beyond animal communication, sound plays a role in orientation and survival. Salmon are believed to imprint on the specific soundscape of their home river, using it to navigate back after years at sea. Coral larvae may use the sound of healthy reefs to locate places to settle. Sound is not background here. It is a map, a memory, a signal, and the ocean listens too. Just as it reflects light and holds heat, it absorbs sound, particularly low-frequency noise, which can travel enormous distances. These deep hums can circle the globe, bending with water temperature and depth, revealing shifting conditions in the ocean's interior. Sound is also used by scientists to study undersea earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. When a volcano erupts beneath the sea, the sound waves travel fast, warning systems pick them up, and alerts can be issued to distant coastlines. In this way, the ocean's voice becomes a tool of safety and survival. There is a haunting quality to underwater sound. It is slower, rounder, more immersive than its counterpart in air. It wraps around you. It moves through you. Divers often describe hearing the ocean not just with their ears, but with their whole body. To descend into that world is to step into a realm where the unseen is revealed by the heard. The sea remembers everything it hears, every ship's pass, every whale's call, every distant thunder. And though we may not always understand the language, we are part of the conversation. Our actions echo, even when we do not speak. When you stand at the edge of the ocean and look down, what you see is more than just a reflection. You see yourself, yes, but also something much larger. A mirror held up not only to the sky above, but to the Earth's entire system. The ocean is a mirror of the climate, the atmosphere, the land, and all life in between. It does not just reflect light, it reflects truth. On a calm day, the sea can be as smooth as glass, mirroring clouds, gulls, and the golden wash of the setting sunday. But what it reflects more deeply beneath the shimmer is the state of the planet itself. Increases in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere don't vanish. Much of it is absorbed by the ocean. When this happens, the water becomes more acidic, altering the chemistry that marine life depends on. Shell-building creatures, plankton, clams, corals begin to struggle. Their homes weaken, their systems fail, and so the mirror clouds. Coral reefs, often called the rainforests of the sea, bleach when stressed. They lose their color, their vibrancy fades. Not because the sunlight is different, but because the balance between light, heat, and water has shifted too far. The ocean also reflects heat. It stores more than 90% of the excess warmth generated by human-made greenhouse gases. This immense absorption buffers us for now, but it comes at a cost. Warmer oceans fuel stronger storms. They disrupt fisheries. They melt sea ice. They drive species toward the poles in search of cooler waters. Sea surface temperatures are now carefully watched by satellites. A degree or two may not sound like much, but to the delicate balances of marine ecosystems, it is a revolution. It's like turning up the thermostat on a garden that only grows within a narrow range. The mirror begins to crack. But the ocean also reflects us in subtler, more hopeful ways. Where there is protection, life returns. Marine reserves, when respected, show astonishing resilience. Fish populations rebound. Coral begins to regrow. Kelp forests re-establish themselves, offering shelter and nourishment. Mangroves, those tangled guardians of the coast, trap carbon, soften waves, and host nurseries for countless species. When we pull back, the ocean breathes more freely. Even in its vastness, the sea is not invulnerable. But neither is it helpless. It responds, always, to the touch it receives, whether harsh or gentle. And in that way, it mirrors not only the state of the world, but the nature of our choices. We often look up to the stars for perspective, for wonder, for escape. But the ocean has always been the more honest mirror. It is here, on this planet, that our lives are most intricately reflected. Look at the waves. They carry the smoke of distant fires, the chemicals of distant fields. They absorb the noise of our engines, the heat of our ambitions, and still they return to the shore, over and over, asking nothing but respect. The ocean does not judge. It reflects. It shows us what we've done. And if we look closely, it can also show us what's possible. Because just as it absorbs, it can heal. Just as it mirrors damage, it can mirror care. Its ecosystems, though fragile, are also dynamic. They respond quickly to protection, to restoration, to time. So when you next see the sea, whether from a cliff, a boat, or through the window of a plane, pause for a moment. Don't just look at it, look into it. What it shows you may not always be easy to face, but it will be real. And in that honesty there is a kind of grace. Before the first tree stretched skyward, before the mountains rose from shifting plates, before even the atmosphere grew thick with breath, there was ocean. Not exactly the ocean we know today, but water, vast and patient, already pooling in the low places of the earth. It has outlived continents, swallowed coastlines, watched stars wheel through the sky while life crawled from its depths to take its first uncertain steps onto land. The ocean is not only old, it is the oldest witness this planet has. It has seen fire and frost, extinction and explosion. It has held the debris of comets, the bones of empires, the songs of whales that will never be heard again. It has been both the cradle and the crypt of life, and it remembers, not in language, not in letters, but in layer and current, salt and silence. In its depths, there are places no human has touched, trenches darker than night, mountains higher than Everest, hidden beneath miles of pressure. Creatures drift there, glowing softly in the void, living lives shaped by tides we cannot feel. The sea knows how to keep a secret, yet it also speaks, in waves and weather, in coral rings and polar melt, in the arc of hurricanes and the temperature of spring. It tells us, over and over, what has come before and what might come again. It has taught us the rhythm of cycles, evaporation, condensation, rain, runoff, return. It has carried our ships, powered our mills, fed our nations. We have mapped its coasts, charted its dangers, and yet it remains largely unknown. Even now, with all our instruments, we have explored less than 10% of the ocean floor. Satellites scan distant planets more thoroughly than the world beneath our waves. But the ocean does not demand to be known. It waits, as it always has, moving in loops longer than our lives. In a single drop of seawater, there are more microbes than stars in the galaxy. Life, in its tiniest forms, thrives where the sun cannot reach. In hydrothermal vents, in frozen brine channels, in endless midwater deserts, life finds a way. The ocean remembers that too, how to adapt, how to survive. It does not move quickly, but it endures. And as we change, as cities rise, forests fall, and climate warms, the ocean watches. It absorbs our excess, it cradles our mistakes, but it is not without limit. Its patience is long, but not eternal. Even the oldest witness can shift. Yet tonight, in this quiet moment, the sea is still out there, moving beneath the moonlight, brushing against distant shores, lifting and lowering ships as gently as breath. The same breath that now slows as you lie still. Let your thoughts settle like silt in deep water. Let the hush of the tides pull gently on your mind, not with force, but with rhythm. You do not need to remember every detail. The ocean already does. You are held by something ancient, something vast, something calm. You do not need to understand the depths to feel their presence. And if sleep comes now, let it. If not, drift as the sea does, quietly, continuously, without hurry. Let the stories of water carry you, through ice and current, sound and silence, memory and motion, because the sea is still out there, and it remembers. So from all of us at Sleepy Stories, we wish you a good night.